Cherokee healers had 10 of them. 10 distinct mineral soak formulas, each built for a different kind of pain. Long before Epsom salt had a pharmacy aisle, Cherokee communities in western North Carolina were using magnesium-rich mineral soaks in ways a 1930s Bureau of Indian Affairs field report documented. That $3 bag in your cabinet carries more real therapeutic logic than most $60 sports recovery products. So why did those exact formulas vanish from public record after 1952? That is the question nobody in the wellness industry wants you asking. Here is what nobody told you about that soak. It was not a casual ritual. It was not one remedy passed down informally. Cherokee communities in the southern Appalachian Mountains had built a system around warm mineral water, a layered, purposeful system with 10 specific variations, each one calibrated to a different physical need: muscle damage, joint inflammation, skin irritation, circulation failure, deep fatigue after hard labor. Each soak had its own additions, its own temperature logic, its own timing, and for decades, federal health workers looked at that system and called it superstition. Stay with me, because the superstition turned out to be science. There is a document, not easy to find. A researcher in North Carolina stumbled on a photocopied page from a 1938 Cherokee Agency Health Survey while pulling files from a university archive. The page was typed on paper yellowed at the edges, with handwritten margin notes in pencil. The county it referenced was Swain County, deep western North Carolina, the heart of Cherokee country. And on that page, under a section titled Household Mineral Bath Protocols, someone had listed specific soak practices used regularly in Cherokee households. Not ceremonially, not occasionally, weekly, as a routine, as simply as making a meal. That detail matters more than it sounds, because the story we were told was that these practices were vague, spiritual, informal, and untraceable. The document suggests otherwise. Here is the part nobody tells you about Epsom salt. The active compound is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium does not stay at the surface of your skin when you soak in warm water. It moves in. Researchers call it transdermal absorption. Your skin under warm water becomes more permeable. The magnesium enters, and inside muscle tissue, magnesium is what allows tight, contracted fibers to release. It is what reduces inflammatory signaling. It is part of what your body uses to process lactic acid accumulation after heavy physical work. Your muscles are not just sore. In most cases, they are also starved for magnesium, and warm water opens the door. But the Cherokee soak system was not plain Epsom salt and water. That is the part that changes everything. The 1938 survey notes additions: oak bark, pine resin, yarrow, clay minerals, apple cider, mullein leaf, each one layered into the soak for a specific reason. Oak bark carried tannins with astringent and anti-inflammatory properties. Yarrow had been used in wound and circulation support since before European contact. Ginger root, referenced in later ethnobotanical records, drove heat deeper into muscle tissue. And this is not guesswork. Ethnobotanist James Mooney, who spent years documenting Cherokee plant knowledge in the 1880s and the 1890s, recorded the layered and purposeful nature of plant-based healing in Cherokee communities, not as fringe practice, as established tradition. Early Appalachian settlers knew some of this too. By the early 1900s, regional communities in Tennessee and Virginia were calling similar practices drawing baths, documented in home remedy collections and later referenced in University of Tennessee agricultural extension bulletins from the 1910s and the 1920s. The Cherokee weren't anomalies. They were the source of a regional knowledge network that had spread across the mountains over generations. Here is a number worth remembering. More than half of American adults today show signs of magnesium deficiency, over 50%, not in 1938, right now. And the southern Appalachian communities that built these soak systems had mineral-rich spring water and centuries of accumulated knowledge about how to use it. Then something changed. The year is 1952. Remember that number? The significance is coming. After World War II, a push for health standardization swept through rural American communities. Federal agencies moved into areas like Swain County with pamphlets, programs, and prescribed protocols. Cherokee agency health workers received new directives. Traditional hygiene and wellness practices were to be replaced with approved commercial alternatives. The language was clinical. The intent on paper was modernization. But the result was erasure. The Epsom salt soaks were not banned. That would have been too obvious. They were simply never mentioned again. Health pamphlets distributed in Cherokee communities by 1955 do not include them. The gap between what was documented in the 1930s and what was promoted to those same communities 20 years later is not subtle. And it is not explained. By the mid-1950s, muscle pain had a product aisle. Bengay, aspirin, heating pads, brand name recovery tools with margins, advertising budgets, and retail placement. A soak in a tub cost companies nothing, and knowledge that cost nothing was worth nothing to them. The formulas didn't disappear. They were documented, filed, and then something very specific happened to where they went next. The year 1952 is not random. That is the year everything shifted. Not with a dramatic announcement, not with a single banned document, but with a quiet, bureaucratic revision that rewrote the rules around what a product could claim to do. The Durham-Humphrey Amendment had passed in 1951. It sharpened the line between drugs and consumer products. Then in 1952, the FDA expanded its definitions around therapeutic claims. The rule was straightforward. If a product claimed to treat a physical condition, it needed to go through drug approval pathways. That process was expensive, it was slow, and it was completely out of reach for a $3 mineral salt with no patent, no corporate sponsor, and no lobby behind it. So companies selling Epsom salt stopped printing therapeutic language on the packaging. Not because the science was wrong, because the regulatory pathway was impossible. And when the language disappeared from the packaging, it disappeared from community health education too. Teachers and health workers stopped referencing the soaks to avoid crossing regulatory lines. The knowledge didn't get disproven. It got reclassified as nothing, too ordinary to patent, too unprotected to promote, too cheap to matter to anyone with a financial stake in the conversation. This is where it changes. That is not a conspiracy. That is a bureaucratic side effect, with a very convenient outcome for an industry that had just discovered how much money there was in selling muscle pain relief by the tube and the bottle. Now go back to that 1938 document from Swain County. The BIA Health Survey doesn't just mention that mineral soaks existed, it cross-references them with specific plant additions and notes the intended effect of each one. Oak bark was listed alongside soaks for joint inflammation. Its tannins work as natural astringents, reducing swelling and soft tissue around joints. Yarrow was paired with circulation-focused soaks. Traditional use of yarrow for blood flow and bruising runs through Cherokee, Appalachian, and early European herbal records alike. Ginger root appeared in the deeper muscle recovery notes. Its heat-driving compounds push warmth into tissue layers that surface-level warmth does not reach on its own. Clay was listed for drawing soaks, pulling irritants toward the skin surface. Apple cider for pH balancing, and skin support. Here is the part that should stop you. These additions, plant by plant, purpose by purpose, map almost exactly onto what sports medicine researchers began recommending in peer-reviewed literature starting in the 1990s. Not approximately, not loosely, with enough specificity that reading the field notes next to a modern sports recovery guide feels less like coincidence and more like rediscovery. And then in 2006, a researcher named Dr. Rosemary Waring at the University of Birmingham published a study on magnesium absorption through warm water soaks. Her findings confirmed transdermal uptake, meaning that magnesium does in fact move through skin into tissue during immersion. The mechanism that had been called superstition in the 1940s had peer-reviewed confirmation by 2006, 60 years later, after the knowledge had already been quietly set aside. Now here are the 10 soaks, recovered, not invented. The first is the basic magnesium reset, plain Epsom salt in warm water for general muscle soreness after physical work. The second adds ginger root for deeper heat penetration into stubborn tension. The third uses apple cider vinegar alongside Epsom salt for skin irritation and surface inflammation. The fourth brings in clay for a drawing soak, historically used for bruising and localized swelling. The fifth adds pine needle infusion, antimicrobial, aromatic, and traditionally tied to respiratory and sinus support during cold season. The sixth uses yarrow for circulation, particularly for foot fatigue and lower leg heaviness after long days on your feet. The seventh is an oak bark soak for joint area inflammation, astringent, cooling, direct. The eighth adds mullein leaf to a warm foot soak for congestion support, traditionally used when you feel a cold settling in. The ninth is a lavender and Epsom blend for sleep preparation, used to lower the body's physical tension before rest. The 10th adds black pepper extract for circulation activation, a heat-building addition that turns the final soak into a recovery and stimulation tool in one. Every one of those ingredients is either in your pantry already or available at any grocery store for under a few dollars. Not a specialty health shop, not an online subscription, a grocery store. The average American spends somewhere between $400 and $800 every year on muscle and joint recovery products. Patches, gels, foam rollers, supplements, specialty bath salts with brand names and wellness influencers and $40 price tags. And underneath all of it, documented in a yellowed survey page from 1938, cross-referenced with ethnobotanical records from the 1880s, and confirmed by a university study in 2006, is a system of 10 soaks that costs almost nothing. This wasn't too complicated to survive. It was too simple to profit from. Think about what that means. A system of practical wellness knowledge, documented, purposeful, layered, and effective enough to be validated by modern research, was sitting in Cherokee communities in the mountains of North Carolina. It spread to Appalachian settler families. It appeared in university extension records. It was surveyed and filed by federal health workers. And then, quietly, as product aisles grew and regulatory language tightened, it became the kind of thing nobody mentioned anymore. Not banned, not disproven, just moved off the table. The person watching this is the kind of person who notices that, who looks at a $3 bag of Epsom salt and understands that it carries a history longer than its pharmacy shelf life, who reads a margin note on a yellowed page and understands that somebody once knew something important and somebody else decided that knowledge should stay quiet. Tonight, try the ginger and Epsom soak. Just warm water, magnesium, and ginger. See what you feel in the morning. Then come back and tell me what happened. Drop a comment below. Which of these 10 soaks are you starting with? And stay close, because next time we are going into a buried Cherokee bark remedy. Something a major pharmaceutical company quietly studied in 1967 and never published. The internal file existed. The study ran. The results were real. And then the whole thing disappeared into a corporate archive and was never mentioned again. That one is even bigger than this.